Maya Chen walked quietly through the hallways of Mountain View High School like she did every morning. Her black hair was tied in a simple ponytail and she carried her books close to her chest. Other students barely noticed her as she moved between classes. Teachers saw her as an average student who turned in her homework on time but never raised her hand to answer questions. Her classmates thought she was just another quiet girl who preferred to stay in the background. What nobody knew was that Maya had a secret that would shock everyone who thought they knew her. Every weekend when she told her parents she was going hiking in the mountains, Maya was actually doing something completely different. She was learning to become one of the most skilled shooters anyone had ever seen. Her grandfather, Colonel Chen, was the only person who knew about Maya's incredible abilities. He was a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes who had spent 30 years in the military. 3 wars had taught him everything about weapons and survival. When Maya was just 12 years old, he had noticed something special about her steady hands and sharp eyesight during a family camping trip. That day, Colonel Chen had brought along his old hunting rifle to show Maya how to shoot tin cans. Most children would have been scared of the loud noise or unable to hit anything, but Maya had picked up the rifle like she was born to hold it. Her first shot hit the can perfectly in the center. Her second shot split the first can in half. By the end of that afternoon, Maya was hitting targets that grown men would struggle to reach. Colonel Chen knew immediately that his granddaughter had a natural talent that appeared maybe once in a million people. He also knew that such a gift came with great responsibility, so he made Maya promise to keep their shooting lessons secret until she was old enough to understand what her abilities really meant. For 5 years, Maya had kept that promise perfectly. Every Saturday morning, she would pack a small backpack and tell her parents she wanted to explore the mountain trails. Her mother would remind her to be careful and her father would give her some money for lunch. They never suspected that their quiet daughter was actually learning skills that most soldiers never mastered. The secret shooting range was hidden deep in the forest about 2 hours' walk from Maya's house. Colonel Chen had built it years ago in a natural clearing surrounded by tall pine trees. The trees blocked any sound from reaching the main hiking trails. Thick bushes hid the entrance so well that even experienced hikers would walk right past without seeing anything unusual. Maya loved everything about those Saturday lessons. She loved the smell of pine needles and gunpowder mixed together. She loved the feeling of complete focus when she lined up a difficult shot. Most of all, she loved the proud smile on her grandfather's face when she hit targets that seemed impossible to reach. Colonel Chen taught Maya much more than just how to pull a trigger. He showed her how to read wind patterns by watching leaves move in the trees. He explained how bullets dropped over long distances and how temperature affected accuracy. Maya learned to calculate ranges using only her eyes by measuring objects against her thumb. She discovered how to control her heartbeat and breathing so her hands would remain perfectly steady. The lessons were not easy. Colonel Chen made Maya practice holding heavy rifles in shooting position for hours until her arms ached. He taught her to remain completely motionless while lying on cold ground covered with rocks and thorns. Maya learned to ignore hunger, thirst, and discomfort while waiting for the perfect moment to take a shot. Winter lessons were the hardest. Snow made everything slippery and cold wind made accurate shooting nearly impossible. But Colonel Chen insisted that real marksmen had to perform well in any weather conditions. Maya practiced shooting while wearing thick gloves and heavy winter coats. She learned to clear ice from rifle scopes and adjust for how cold air affected bullet flight. By the time Maya turned 17, she could consistently hit targets at distances that amazed even her grandfather. She could shoot accurately while lying down, standing up, or even hanging upside down from tree branches. Maya could hit moving targets and split playing cards with bullets from 300 meters away. Her shooting had become so precise that she rarely missed anything she aimed at. But Maya's incredible skills remained completely hidden from her normal life. At school, she pretended to be interested in the same things as other girls her age. She listened to her friends talk about boys and movies and fashion trends. Maya smiled and nodded at the right times, but inside she was thinking about wind speed and bullet trajectories. Her parents thought Maya was just going through a shy phase that she would eventually outgrow. They encouraged her to join school clubs or try out for sports teams. Maya always found polite excuses to avoid activities that might interfere with her weekend training schedule. She told them she preferred quiet hobbies like reading and hiking. Maya's teachers saw her as a student who worked hard but lacked confidence to participate in class discussions. They never imagined that the quiet girl in the back row could outshoot police officers and military veterans. Maya's English teacher once commented that she seemed to have good observation skills, but needed to speak up more often. Her classmates barely thought about Maya at all. She was just part of the background like the desks and whiteboards. Some girls tried to include her in their social groups, but Maya always found ways to avoid making close friendships. She worried that friends might ask too many questions about how she spent her weekends. Maya felt lonely sometimes, keeping such a big secret from everyone around her. She wanted to tell someone about the amazing things she could do with a rifle, but Colonel Chen had taught her that truly dangerous skills should remain hidden until they were absolutely needed. He often told her that the best weapons were the ones nobody knew existed. As Maya walked home from school that afternoon, she had no idea that her peaceful life was about to change forever. She was already planning her next day's shooting practice and wondering what new challenges her grandfather would create for her. Maya thought she would have years more time to develop her abilities before anyone discovered her secret talent. Tomorrow would bring helicopters and tanks and foreign soldiers to her quiet mountain town. Tomorrow, Maya would learn that all those years of hidden practice had been preparing her for something much more serious than hitting tin cans in the forest. Maya woke up to a sound she had never heard before in her peaceful mountain town. The deep rumbling noise seemed to shake the walls of her bedroom and rattle the windows. She sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes and trying to figure out what was making such a terrible racket so early in the cool morning. The sound grew louder and closer, until Maya realized it was coming from directly above her house. She jumped out of bed and ran to her window, pulling back the curtains to look outside. What she saw made her heart stop beating for a moment. 3 large military helicopters were flying just above the rooftops, moving slowly down the main street of her town. Maya had seen helicopters before, but never like these. They were painted in dark green and brown colors and had weapons mounted on their sides. Strange symbols were painted on their doors that Maya did not recognize. These were not rescue helicopters or news helicopters. These were war machines, and they were flying over her home. As the helicopters disappeared over the hills, Maya heard a new sound that made her stomach feel sick. Heavy engines were rumbling up the mountain road that led to her town. She pressed her face against the cold window glass and watched as the first military truck appeared around the bend. Then came another truck and another, until Maya counted more than 20 vehicles rolling toward the town center. Maya ran downstairs calling for her parents, but found the house empty. A note on the kitchen table said they had left early to visit her aunt in the next valley and would be back that evening. Maya felt completely alone as she realized that whatever was happening outside, she would have to face it by herself. The sounds from the street grew louder and more frightening. Maya could hear truck doors slamming shut and heavy boots marching on the pavement. Men were shouting orders in a language that sounded harsh and foreign. Maya crept back to her bedroom window and carefully looked outside from behind the curtain. What she saw made her feel like she was trapped in a terrible nightmare. Foreign soldiers wearing uniforms she did not recognize were setting up roadblocks at both ends of her street. They carried rifles and wore helmets and moved with the confidence of men who had done this many times before. Some soldiers were hanging banners written in their strange language from lampposts and building walls. Maya watched in horror as soldiers began knocking on doors and ordering families to come outside. Her neighbors were stumbling out of their houses looking confused and scared. Children were crying and holding onto their parents while soldiers shouted instructions that nobody could understand. The peaceful morning had turned into chaos in just a few minutes. Mrs. Peterson, who lived next door, was an elderly woman who walked with a cane. Maya watched as 2 soldiers grabbed her arms and forced her to move faster than her old legs could carry her. When Mrs. Peterson stumbled and fell, one soldier kicked dirt at her and yelled something mean. Maya felt anger burning in her chest as she watched her kind neighbor being treated so badly. More soldiers were marching down the street carrying boxes of equipment and setting up what looked like a command post in the town square. Maya could see officers pointing at buildings and giving orders to groups of soldiers. They were clearly planning to stay for a long time and control every part of the town. Through her window, Maya could see that the soldiers had surrounded the local police station. The few police officers in their small town had apparently been overwhelmed during the night. Maya noticed that the American flag that usually flew above the police station had been replaced with a different flag she did not recognize. The realization hit Maya like a punch in the stomach. Her country was being invaded by a foreign army, and her little mountain town had been captured. All the news reports about tensions with other countries that her parents discussed at dinner had suddenly become real. War had come to her home and everything she knew was about to change forever. Maya heard heavy footsteps on her front porch and the sound of someone pounding on her door. Her whole body started shaking as she realized the soldiers had reached her house. She quietly moved away from the window and hid behind her bedroom door, listening to the angry voices outside. The pounding on the door became more violent, and Maya heard the sound of wood splintering. The soldiers were breaking into her house. She could hear their boots walking through the rooms downstairs as they searched for people. Maya held her breath and tried to stay perfectly still as the footsteps came closer to the stairs. One soldier climbed the stairs and walked down the hallway, checking each bedroom. Maya pressed herself against the wall behind her door as the footsteps stopped right outside her room. The door handle turned slowly and Maya closed her eyes, expecting to be discovered at any moment. But then another soldier called out from downstairs, saying something in their foreign language. The soldier in the hallway answered back, and Maya heard his footsteps moving away from her door and back down the stairs. After several terrifying minutes, the voices faded and the front door slammed shut. Maya was alone again, but she knew the soldiers would return. From her window, Maya could see that more families were being forced out of their homes and gathered in the town square. The soldiers were separating men from women and adults from children. Maya realized with growing fear that they were probably planning to take people away to prison camps or work camps, like she had read about in history books. Maya knew she had to do something, but she felt helpless and scared. She was just one 17-year-old girl against an entire army of trained soldiers. What could she possibly do to fight back against such overwhelming force? But then Maya remembered her grandfather and all the skills he had taught her over the past 5 years. Colonel Chen had always told Maya that her shooting abilities were a gift that should be used to protect innocent people when they needed help most. Maya had never imagined that day would come so soon, but now her neighbors and friends were in danger. The foreign soldiers were treating her people like prisoners in their own town. Maya made a decision that would change her life forever. She was not going to hide in her bedroom while her community was being destroyed. She was going to find her grandfather and use every skill he had taught her to fight back against the invaders. Maya opened her closet and began packing supplies for what might be the most dangerous journey of her life. Maya spent 2 long days walking through the mountain forests carrying her grandfather's rifle and a backpack filled with supplies. Her feet were covered with blisters and her shoulders ached from the weight of her gear, but she kept moving deeper into the wilderness. She followed old hunting trails that her grandfather had shown her years ago when teaching her about survival in the mountains. The forest was quiet except for the sounds of birds and wind moving through the pine trees. Maya had to stop several times to hide when she heard helicopters flying overhead, searching for people who had escaped from the captured towns. Each time she pressed herself against large rocks or crawled under thick bushes until the aircraft passed by without seeing her. On the second night, Maya finally saw a small campfire, burning in a clearing far ahead of her. She moved very carefully through the trees, staying low and quiet like her grandfather had taught her. As she got closer, she could see men sitting around the fire cleaning weapons and talking in low voices. Maya recognized some of them as people from her town and neighboring villages. Maya took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the trees with her hands raised to show she was not a threat. The men around the fire immediately grabbed their weapons and pointed them at her. A big man with a thick beard stood up and demanded to know who she was and what she was doing in their secret camp. Maya explained that she was Colonel Chen's granddaughter and that she had come to join the resistance fighters. The bearded man, who introduced himself as Captain Rodriguez, looked at Maya with disbelief and annoyance. He told her that fighting against trained soldiers was not a game for children to play. Captain Rodriguez said that war was serious, business that required strength and experience, that teenage girls simply did not possess. The other resistance fighters gathered around Maya, looking at her with expressions of doubt and concern. There were about 15 men in the camp, ranging from young adults to middle-aged veterans. Some had been police officers or security guards before the invasion. Others were hunters and farmers who knew the mountains well. All of them were much bigger and stronger than Maya. An older man named Sergeant Martinez walked over and examined Maya's rifle. He nodded with approval when he recognized the quality of her grandfather's weapon, but shook his head sadly when he looked back at Maya. Sergeant Martinez told Captain Rodriguez that sending a child into battle would be like murder even if she came from a military family. Maya felt frustrated and angry as she listened to the men discussing her like she was not even there. She tried to explain that her grandfather had trained her for 5 years and that she could shoot better than most soldiers. But Captain Rodriguez just laughed and said that shooting tin cans in the forest was completely different from fighting in real combat against enemy troops. Captain Rodriguez told Maya that the best thing she could do was return home and hide until the war was over. He offered to assign 2 men to escort her back to her town and help her find a safe place to stay. The other fighters agreed that this was the smart thing to do for everyone involved, especially for Maya herself. Maya realized that the resistance fighters would never take her seriously if she just kept talking about her abilities. She needed to show them what she could actually do with her rifle. Maya asked Captain Rodriguez to give her one chance to prove that she belonged in their group. She promised that if she failed his test, she would leave immediately and never bother them again. Captain Rodriguez sighed and agreed to Maya's request, mainly because he wanted to end the argument quickly. He pointed to a small metal can sitting on a fallen log about 400 meters away at the far edge of the clearing. The can was barely visible in the dim light of early evening and surrounded by shadows from the trees. Several of the resistance fighters squinted their eyes, trying to even see the target that Captain Rodriguez had chosen. Sergeant Martinez commented that hitting such a small object at that distance would be difficult, even for an experienced marksman during daylight hours. Captain Rodriguez smiled confidently, believing that Maya would quickly realize she was not ready for this kind of challenge. Maya carefully examined the target area, studying the wind patterns and calculating the distance just like her grandfather had taught her. She could feel all the men watching her with mixtures of curiosity and skepticism. Maya knew that this single shot would determine whether she would be accepted as a fighter or sent away, like a foolish child. Maya positioned herself in a stable shooting stance and raised her grandfather's rifle to her shoulder. She controlled her breathing and let her heartbeat slow down until she felt completely calm and focused. The forest became silent around her as Maya lined up the shot and gently began squeezing the trigger. The rifle fired with a loud crack that echoed through the mountains. 400 meters away, the small metal can flew off the log and landed somewhere in the bushes with a clear metallic ringing sound. Maya lowered her weapon and looked at the resistance fighters who were staring at her with expressions of complete shock and amazement. Captain Rodriguez walked over to Maya and extended his hand for a firm handshake. He told her that any person who could make that shot in those conditions was welcome in their group. Sergeant Martinez and the other fighters gathered around Maya with new respect and began asking questions about her training and experience. Maya felt proud and relieved as the resistance fighters accepted her as one of their team members. Captain Rodriguez assigned her a spot to set up her sleeping bag and introduced her to the other fighters by name. For the first time since the invasion began, Maya felt like she had found people who would help her fight back against the enemy soldiers, but Maya also noticed that some of the men still seemed uncertain about having a teenage girl in their combat unit. They were impressed by her shooting demonstration, but worried about how she would perform during actual battles. Maya understood that earning their complete trust would take time and more proof of her abilities under real combat conditions. That night, as Maya lay in her sleeping bag looking up at the stars through the pine branches, she felt both excited and nervous about what lay ahead. She had taken the first step toward using her skills to help her people, but the real challenges were still coming. Maya spent her first week with the resistance fighters, learning their daily routines and getting to know each member of the team. She woke up before sunrise every morning to practice her shooting, while the other fighters were still sleeping. Captain Rodriguez had given her a small tent near the edge of camp and assigned her to help with cooking, meals, and maintaining weapons. During the day, Maya listened carefully as the experienced fighters planned their operations against the enemy forces. She learned that the invading army had captured most of the towns in their region and was setting up permanent bases to control the local population. The resistance fighters were trying to disrupt enemy supply lines and gather information about troop movements. Maya's first real mission came when Captain Rodriguez needed someone to provide cover during a raid on an enemy supply convoy. The plan was simple but dangerous. 6 fighters would attack the convoy on a mountain road, while Maya positioned herself on a hill overlooking the ambush site. Her job was to watch for enemy reinforcements and protect the team if anything went wrong. Maya felt nervous excitement as she climbed to her assigned position, carrying her rifle and extra ammunition. This was completely different from shooting tin cans with her grandfather in the peaceful forest. Real enemy soldiers would be shooting back at her and her teammates. Maya had trained for years, but this would be her first taste of actual combat. The enemy convoy appeared right on schedule, consisting of 3 trucks loaded with supplies and food. Maya watched through her rifle scope as Captain Rodriguez and his men attacked from both sides of the road. The enemy soldiers were caught completely by surprise, and the raid went exactly as planned. Maya did not need to fire a single shot, but she felt proud to be part of a successful mission. Over the next few weeks, Maya participated in several more operations against enemy patrols and supply lines. Each time, Captain Rodriguez gave her supporting roles that kept her away from the most dangerous fighting. Maya would position herself on high ground and watch for threats while the other fighters did the actual attacking and capturing of enemy equipment. Maya proved herself to be reliable and accurate during these missions, but she began to feel frustrated with her limited responsibilities. She could see enemy soldiers through her scope who were causing problems for her teammates, but Captain Rodriguez always ordered her to stay hidden unless absolutely necessary. Maya knew she could eliminate threats and save lives, but she was not allowed to use her full abilities. During one mission, Maya watched helplessly as 3 resistance fighters were captured while trying to gather intelligence in a nearby town. She had a clear shot at the enemy guards who were taking her teammates prisoner, but Captain Rodriguez had specifically ordered her not to engage unless the entire team was in danger. Maya followed orders but felt terrible watching her friends being loaded into enemy trucks. The captured fighters were named Tommy, Carlos, and Jake. They were all young men who had joined the resistance after their families were killed or taken away by the invading forces. Maya had become friends with them during long evenings around the campfire, listening to their stories and sharing her own experiences. Now they were gone, and Maya blamed herself for not acting when she could have saved them. Maya approached Captain Rodriguez after they returned to camp and asked permission to take on more challenging assignments. She explained that her skills were being wasted on simple observation duties, while enemy soldiers were hurting innocent people every day. Maya told him that she was ready for greater responsibility and wanted to make a real difference in their fight. Captain Rodriguez listened to Maya's concerns but remained cautious about giving her more dangerous tasks. He explained that leadership meant protecting all team members, especially the youngest ones. Captain Rodriguez had seen too many young fighters get killed because they were eager to prove themselves in combat. He told Maya that patience and survival were more important than heroic actions. Maya understood Captain Rodriguez's reasoning, but she still felt like the other fighters did not fully trust her abilities. They treated her like a junior member who needed constant protection and supervision. During planning meetings, the experienced fighters would discuss tactics and strategies while Maya was expected to just listen quietly and follow orders without asking questions. Sergeant Martinez tried to help Maya understand the situation by explaining that earning trust in combat took time and repeated success. He told her that the other fighters were not doubting her shooting skills, but were concerned about how she would react under extreme pressure. Sergeant Martinez said that many excellent marksmen had panicked during their first real battles and made mistakes that cost lives. Maya knew that Sergeant Martinez was trying to be helpful, but she felt ready to prove herself in more serious combat situations. She had been training with weapons since she was 12 years old and had never panicked or failed to hit her targets. Maya believed that her teammates were being overly protective because of her age and gender, rather than her actual abilities. The other resistance fighters had mixed feelings about Maya's role in their group. Some, like Tommy and Carlos before their capture, had accepted her as a skilled team member who deserved respect. Others worried that having a teenage girl in combat operations would distract the men or create additional risks that they could not afford during dangerous missions. Maya noticed that the fighters often changed their language and behavior when she was around. They would stop telling certain stories or making crude jokes that they shared freely when Maya was not present. Some men seemed uncomfortable with the idea of a young woman participating in the violent and brutal realities of guerrilla warfare. Despite these challenges, Maya continued to perform well during her assigned missions. She never missed important targets when given permission to shoot, and her intelligence reports about enemy movements were always accurate and detailed. Maya's presence had not caused any problems or failures during their operations against the invading forces. Maya realized that proving herself completely would require more than just good shooting and following orders. She needed an opportunity to demonstrate leadership and initiative during a critical situation. Maya hoped that chance would come soon because she was growing tired of being treated like a child. When she knew she could contribute much more to their cause, Maya spent her free time studying maps of the region and learning about enemy tactics from the more experienced fighters. She wanted to be ready when Captain Rodriguez finally decided to give her the chance to show what she could really accomplish in their war against the invaders. 3 months had passed since Maya joined the resistance fighters, and she had settled into a routine of daily missions and training exercises. The weather was getting colder as autumn turned toward winter, and the mountain forests were covered with orange and yellow leaves. Maya had proven herself reliable during dozens of small operations, but she still felt like the other fighters saw her as just a supporting member rather than a full warrior. Captain Rodriguez assigned Maya to spend 3 days on reconnaissance duty at Eagle Peak, the highest mountain in their region. Her job was to watch enemy movements in the valleys below and report any unusual activity back to the main camp. Maya packed enough food and water for a week, along with her rifle and her grandfather's old military binoculars that had served him well during his own war years. Eagle Peak was a difficult climb that took Maya most of a day to reach, even though she was in excellent physical condition from months of mountain training. The rocky summit offered a perfect view of 3 different valleys, where enemy forces had established supply routes and communication lines. Maya set up a small shelter using rocks and pine branches to hide herself from enemy aircraft while still maintaining a clear view of the areas below. On her second day at Eagle Peak, Maya noticed something that made her stomach feel tight with worry. Through her binoculars, she could see unusual activity in the eastern valley, where enemy forces normally kept only a few patrol vehicles. Instead of the usual 2 or 3 trucks, Maya counted more than 50 military vehicles moving slowly along the mountain roads toward the main resistance stronghold. Maya adjusted her binoculars and studied the enemy convoy more carefully. What she saw made her realize that this was not a normal supply run or patrol mission. The convoy included at least 20 tanks and armored fighting vehicles, along with dozens of trucks carrying hundreds of soldiers. Maya could see artillery pieces and heavy weapons that the enemy had never brought into their region before. Maya immediately grabbed her radio and called back to the resistance camp. Her voice was urgent as she reported the exact number and types of enemy vehicles she was observing. Maya told Captain Rodriguez that this looked like preparation for a major offensive operation, rather than routine enemy activity. She estimated that the convoy was large enough to completely destroy their main camp and eliminate the entire resistance movement in their area. Captain Rodriguez responded that he would discuss Maya's report with his senior officers and decide what action to take. Maya stressed that the enemy force was moving directly toward their stronghold and would probably arrive within 2 days at their current speed. She urged the resistance leadership to either prepare strong defenses or evacuate the camp immediately because they would be facing overwhelming enemy numbers. Maya spent the rest of that day tracking the enemy convoy and providing detailed updates about their progress and equipment. She counted exactly 47 vehicles, including 12 main battle tanks that could destroy any defensive positions the resistance fighters might try to build. Maya had never seen such a large enemy force in their region, and she knew it meant serious trouble for everyone in the resistance movement. That evening, Maya received a radio message from Sergeant Martinez, telling her that the leadership had discussed her report during their daily planning meeting. Maya felt relieved that her warning was being taken seriously until Sergeant Martinez explained what the officers had actually decided. They believed that Maya had probably seen a routine supply convoy and had exaggerated the threat because of her youth and inexperience with military operations. Maya could not believe what she was hearing over the radio. She tried to explain again that she had clearly seen tanks and artillery pieces that were definitely not part of any supply mission. Maya described the enemy vehicles in detail and emphasized that she had been trained by her grandfather to identify different types of military equipment accurately. She begged Sergeant Martinez to convince the other officers that her report was completely accurate. Sergeant Martinez replied that the senior officers appreciated Maya's dedication, but they believed she might have mistaken regular trucks for tanks because of the distance and lighting conditions. He told Maya that young fighters often became excited during their first major reconnaissance missions and saw threats as bigger than they really were. The officers had decided to continue with their normal activities instead of taking emergency defensive measures. Maya felt desperate and frustrated as she realized that nobody was going to believe her warning. She tried calling Captain Rodriguez directly, but he was busy with other operations and could not come to the radio. Maya sent detailed written reports describing everything she had observed, but the responses from camp indicated that the leadership was not taking her intelligence seriously. Maya decided to try a different approach by contacting individual resistance fighters who might listen to her concerns. She called her friend Roberto, who had always been supportive of her role in the group. But Roberto told Maya that he trusted Captain Rodriguez's judgment more than he trusted the observations of someone who had only been with them for 3 months. Maya tried reaching Miguel and David, who were experienced fighters she had worked with on several missions. Both men listened politely to her warnings but explained that they had to follow orders from their officers. Miguel told Maya that questioning leadership decisions was dangerous for group unity and discipline. David said that maybe Maya was just being overly cautious because she cared about everyone's safety. As the hours passed, Maya became more and more frustrated with the situation. She knew with absolute certainty that a massive enemy force was approaching their camp, but nobody would take action based on her reports. Maya began to understand that her age and gender were making people automatically doubt her judgment. Even though she had proven her skills and reliability over many months, Maya spent a sleepless night on Eagle Peak watching the enemy convoy continue its advance toward the resistance stronghold. Through her binoculars, she could see the vehicles had stopped for the night, but would resume their march in the morning. Maya calculated that they would reach the resistance camp by late afternoon of the following day, if they maintained their current pace. Maya made one final desperate attempt to warn her teammates. She sent a detailed radio message explaining that the enemy attack would begin within 24 hours and that everyone in the camp would be killed or captured unless they took immediate action. Maya begged them to at least send out scouts to verify her reports before it was too late to escape or organize proper defenses. The response from camp was brief and final. Captain Rodriguez told Maya to continue her observation mission and stop sending alarmist reports that were causing unnecessary worry among the fighters. He ordered her to maintain radio silence unless she observed actual combat operations beginning. Maya realized that she was completely alone with knowledge that could save dozens of lives, but no way to convince anyone to listen to her warnings. Maya woke up on Eagle Peak just as the sun was rising behind the mountains. She had barely slept during the night because she kept watching the enemy convoy through her binoculars. The massive force of tanks and trucks had started moving again at dawn, and Maya could see they would reach the resistance stronghold in just a few hours. Her heart pounded with fear as she realized that all her warnings had been ignored and disaster was about to strike. Maya grabbed her radio one last time and tried to contact the resistance camp. She spoke urgently into the microphone, explaining that the enemy attack would begin very soon and that everyone needed to evacuate immediately. But there was no response from the camp radio. Maya tried different frequencies and called specific fighters by name, but only heard static and silence. She began to worry that something had already happened to her teammates. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, Maya heard the first sounds of battle echoing across the mountains. Explosions and gunfire filled the air as the enemy force launched their surprise attack on the resistance stronghold. Maya watched through her binoculars as helicopters circled overhead, while tanks and armored vehicles surrounded the camp from all directions. Her worst fears were coming true, and there was nothing she could do to help from so far away. The resistance fighters had been completely caught off guard, just as Maya had predicted. They stumbled out of their tents and shelters, grabbing weapons and trying to organize some kind of defense. But they were facing overwhelming numbers of enemy soldiers with heavy weapons and air support. What should have been a prepared defensive battle became a desperate fight for survival against impossible odds. Maya could see Captain Rodriguez through her binoculars as he tried to rally his men and coordinate their response to the attack. But enemy tanks were already breaking through their perimeter, and helicopter gunships were attacking their positions with rockets and machine gun fire. The resistance fighters were brave, but they had been taken by surprise and did not have enough weapons or ammunition to fight such a large enemy force. Within the first hour of fighting, Maya watched several of her friends fall under enemy fire. Miguel, who had dismissed her warnings the day before, was hit by shrapnel from a tank shell, and did not get up again. David, who had told her to trust the officers, was trapped behind a burning truck with enemy soldiers closing in from 3 sides. Maya felt sick to her stomach as she realized that many good people were dying because nobody had listened to her. Intelligence reports enemy soldiers were systematically destroying every building and defensive position in the resistance camp. They used flamethrowers to burn the supply tents and explosives to collapse the underground bunkers where ammunition was stored. Black smoke rose into the sky as everything the resistance fighters had built over months of hard work was reduced to rubble and ashes. Maya could hear Captain Rodriguez's voice crackling over the radio as he sent desperate messages asking for help from other resistance groups in the region. But Maya knew that no reinforcements would arrive in time to change the outcome of this battle. The nearest friendly forces were days away and probably did not even know that the attack was happening. Captain Rodriguez and his men were completely on their own against an enemy force 5 times larger than their group. The fighting continued for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. Enemy tanks pushed deeper into the camp while soldiers on foot cleared out every hiding place and defensive position. Maya watched as more of her teammates were killed or wounded trying to slow down the enemy advance. Sergeant Martinez was shot while trying to rescue wounded fighters. Roberto disappeared into the smoke and flames, and Maya never saw him again. By afternoon, it became clear that the resistance fighters could not hold their positions much longer. Captain Rodriguez made the difficult decision to order his surviving men to retreat toward the mountain evacuation routes they had planned for emergencies. But enemy forces had anticipated this move and were already blocking the main escape paths with roadblocks and patrols. Maya felt helpless and frustrated as she watched her friends trying to escape through the mountains, while enemy soldiers pursued them. Some resistance fighters managed to slip away through hidden trails that only locals knew about. Others were caught in the open and forced to surrender or fight hopeless last stands against overwhelming numbers. The proud resistance movement that had seemed so strong was being destroyed in a single day. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the radio one final time as enemy forces closed in on his position. He was calling for any available fighters to help defend the evacuation routes so that wounded men could reach safety. Maya could hear the desperation in his voice as he realized that most of his command was already lost. Captain Rodriguez was asking for miracles that nobody could provide. Maya watched through her binoculars as Captain Rodriguez and the last group of resistance fighters made their final stand near the camp's communication center. They were surrounded by enemy tanks and had no hope of escape, but they kept fighting to buy time for their wounded comrades to get away. Maya saw Captain Rodriguez fall just as enemy soldiers overran his position and captured the radio equipment. As the sun began to set, Maya realized that the resistance stronghold had been completely destroyed. Enemy soldiers were searching through the wreckage looking for survivors and intelligence materials. Helicopters continued circling overhead, while ground patrols spread out into the surrounding forests to hunt down any fighters who had escaped the initial assault. The battle was over and the resistance had suffered a crushing defeat. Maya felt tears running down her face as she thought about all the brave men who had died because their leaders refused to listen to her warnings. If Captain Rodriguez had believed her reports, the entire group could have evacuated safely 2 days earlier. Instead, dozens of good people were dead or captured because nobody took a teenage girl seriously when she tried to save their lives. Maya knew that she was probably the only resistance fighter left in the entire region who was still free and able to continue the fight. But she was just one person with a rifle against an entire army of occupation forces. Maya had never felt so alone and overwhelmed as she watched enemy soldiers celebrating their victory in the valley below, where her friends had lived and died. Maya wiped the tears from her eyes and made a decision that would change everything. She could not bring back the friends who had died in the battle, but she could still help the survivors who were trying to escape through the mountains. Maya packed her rifle and ammunition, then began the dangerous climb down from Eagle Peak toward the destroyed resistance camp. She was no longer the overlooked teenage girl who had been ignored and dismissed. She was a sniper with 5 years of training and nothing left to lose. The journey down the mountain took Maya 3 hours as she moved carefully through the forest, avoiding enemy patrols that were searching for escaped resistance fighters. Maya could hear helicopters flying overhead and soldiers shouting to each other as they combed through the woods looking for survivors. She used every stealth technique her grandfather had taught her to remain invisible. While getting closer to the battlefield, Maya found the perfect shooting position on a rocky ridge that overlooked the entire valley, where the resistance camp had been located. From this elevated spot, she could see for miles in every direction and had clear shots at enemy forces throughout the area. Maya set up her rifle using rocks to create a stable shooting platform and arranged her ammunition within easy reach. She was ready to show the enemy what a real sniper could accomplish. Maya looked through her rifle scope and immediately saw her first target. An enemy sniper was positioned in a tall tree about 600 meters away, picking off resistance fighters who were trying to reach the evacuation routes. This enemy marksman had already killed at least 3 of Maya's friends and was lining up another shot at a wounded man crawling toward safety. Maya calculated the distance and wind conditions, then took careful aim at the enemy sniper. Her shot rang out across the valley and the enemy soldier fell from his tree, hitting the ground with a loud thud. The resistance fighters below looked around in confusion, wondering where the shot had come from. Maya was already moving her rifle to find her next target before the enemy sniper's body stopped moving. Maya spotted another enemy sniper hiding behind a large boulder on the opposite side of the valley. This soldier was also hunting escaped resistance fighters and had just wounded an elderly man who was trying to help injured survivors reach safety. Maya adjusted her aim for the longer distance of nearly 800 meters and fired another precise shot. The second enemy sniper collapsed behind his boulder and would never hurt anyone again. Maya continued systematically eliminating enemy snipers and machine gun teams that were blocking the escape routes. Her shooting was so accurate and deadly that enemy soldiers began to panic as their comrades fell to an invisible marksman they could not locate. Maya moved between different shooting positions after every few shots, making it impossible for the enemy to figure out where the attacks were coming from. Enemy commanders in the valley started shouting orders over their radios, trying to coordinate a response to the mysterious sniper who was picking off their men. They sent patrols into the mountains to search for the shooter, but Maya was always one step ahead of them. She used her knowledge of the forest trails to stay hidden while continuing to eliminate high-value targets throughout the enemy force. Maya's most important target was the enemy command post that had been set up in the center of the destroyed resistance camp. Through her rifle scope, she could see officers pointing at maps and giving orders to coordinate the search for escaped fighters. Maya knew that eliminating these commanders would throw the entire enemy operation into chaos and give her friends a better chance to escape. Lined up her shot on the enemy colonel who appeared to be leading the operation. The distance was over 700 meters and there was a crosswind that would affect her bullet's path. Maya waited patiently for the wind to calm, then fired a perfect shot that eliminated the enemy commander instantly. The other officers dove for cover as Maya continued targeting their communication equipment and destroying their ability to coordinate their forces. Without proper leadership and communication, the enemy soldiers became confused and disorganized. Different units started operating independently, without knowing what other groups were doing. Some soldiers abandoned their positions to look for the mysterious sniper, while others retreated to more defensible locations. The disciplined enemy force that had overwhelmed the resistance camp was falling apart under Maya's relentless precision shooting. Maya spotted a group of resistance fighters trapped in a small canyon with enemy soldiers moving in to capture them. She could see Captain Rodriguez among the survivors, along with several other men she recognized from their months together in the mountains. Maya immediately began targeting the enemy soldiers who were closing in on her, friends providing covering fire that allowed them to break out of the trap and reach safety. Captain Rodriguez's voice suddenly came over Maya's radio as he realized that someone was providing incredible sniper support for the escaping resistance fighters. He called out, asking who was helping them and requesting their location so he could coordinate with their mysterious guardian angel. Maya smiled as she keyed her radio and identified herself to the captain who had dismissed her warnings just days earlier. Maya could hear the amazement and gratitude in Captain Rodriguez's voice as he understood that the teenage girl he had underestimated was single-handedly turning the tide of the battle. He apologized over the radio for not believing her intelligence reports and asked Maya to continue providing cover while he organized the evacuation of remaining survivors. Captain Rodriguez finally understood that Maya was not just another fighter, but a true warrior with extraordinary abilities. For the next several hours, Maya continued eliminating enemy threats and protecting evacuation routes until all the surviving resistance fighters had escaped. into the deep mountains where the enemy could not follow them. Maya had fired over 40 shots during the battle and had not missed a single target. Her intervention had saved dozens of lives and prevented the complete destruction of the resistance movement in their region. As darkness fell over the valley, Maya finally left her shooting position and hiked through the forest to rejoin the surviving resistance fighters at their emergency rally point. When she arrived at the hidden camp, Captain Rodriguez and the other survivors gathered around her with expressions of awe and respect. They finally understood that the quiet girl they had overlooked was actually the most skilled fighter among them. Maya had proven that age and appearance meant nothing compared to courage and ability when the moment came to make a real difference. Her story spread quickly among resistance groups throughout the region, inspiring other people who had been dismissed or underestimated to step forward and contribute their unique talents to the fight for freedom. Maya became a legend whose return had changed the course of history.